Is not scary, but is a bit more on the women fall in love with ghosts trope. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I am doing a list of books. I'm doing my 8 not scary Halloween books. So I absolutely love Halloween, and I read the occasional horror novel. I think I've read 4 or 5 this year. I keep meaning to read more, but I get distracted by science fiction. And I thought I'd make a list of books for those who can't handle, the scares. So I have a bunch of little bit creepy Halloweeny kind of reads. So let me know if you've read any of these or if you have any more recommendations. I'm always down for like an atmospheric kind of tale that isn't like too scary, as well as ones that are quite scary. So I'm going to start off with The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. I don't have the jacket. I think I bought it like this actually for like $2. Anyway, so the story is one post-war summer in the home of rural Warwickshire. Dr. Faraday, the son of a maid who has built a life of quiet respectability as a country physician, is called to a patient at lonely Hundreds Hall. Home to the heiress family of over 2 centuries, the Georgian house, once impressive and handsome, is now in decline. Its masonry crumbling, its gardens choked with weeds, the clock in its stable yard permanently fixed at 20 to 9. Its owners, mother, son, and daughter, are struggling to keep pace with a changing society, as well as with conflicts of their own. But are the heiresses haunted by something more sinister than a dying way of life? Little does Dr. Fairway know how closely and how terrifyingly their stories have become intimately intertwined with his. So this sounds like a kind of a gothic horror story. And it does have a lot of gothic horror elements, but it also twists a lot of them, which I thought was really interesting. And I mean, it has the large, dilapidated mansion that you like in these kind of stories. There's ghost-like sounds and ghost-like parts, and it has a reclusive family. But it's less about the ghost elements. I mean, there are some creepy parts than like the psychological or social elements of the main character. He's a really complex character, and the interesting thing about him is that you're not really sure if you like him or not. And that's kind of what's interesting about Sarah Waters' characters. She often writes characters that are like, they feel more real because you're not sure if you like them. So yeah, like all of her work, it's intricate, it's slow in a good way, and it turns a genre on its head. So I really recommend The Little Stranger if you haven't. There's also a movie that came out, I think a couple years ago, with Dominic Gleeson based on this. I highly recommend reading the book first. The movie's a bit slow. I mean, the book's a bit slow too, if you like that kind of thing. But I'd say the book is infinitely better. So he does a good job. He's a good actor. So the next one I'm going to talk about is The Phantom Forest by Liz Caron. So what's this one about? So Saichia, I think that's how you say her name, I'm not really sure. Saichia's father told her this story as a child, a story of the most holy place in the underworld, the forest of Lida, where all souls go to rest before embarking on a new life. But Saichia's father is dead now, and his killer has put a target on her back. After being chosen for her village's human sacrifice ritual, Saichia is transported to the underworld and must join forces with Haben, a demon to whom she was sacrificed to protect the family she left behind from beyond the grave. So this sounds kind of like a horror story. It's more of a sci-fi fantasy. It has kind of horror-like moments, but it's more action. It's mostly about a redemptive journey through the underworld than it is about, a horrific tale. I mean, there is a human sacrifice at the start, but there's nothing too kind of gory. Basically, you have a sister trying to save her brother. A very shippable possible romance. Interesting, kind of mythologically based creatures and monsters, and a totalitarian government that is there to be taken down. So it's a lot of fun, and it's just Halloweeny enough, but it's not scary. I highly recommend it. I think it's independently published, or it's through Inkshares, which I think is it's kind of like a small press that, Inkshares is interesting. Anyway, yeah, recommend it. Now, this is probably going to be my favorite read of the year. So if you watch my channel, you're going to know that I'm probably talking about Gideon the Ninth. I also have Harrow the Ninth as well. The covers are gorgeous, I must say. So, what is Gideon the Ninth if you haven't read it? The Emperor needs necromancers. The ninth necromancer needs a swordswoman. Gideon has a sword, some dirty magazines, and no more time for undead bullshit. Brought up by unfriendly, ossifying nuns, ancient retainers, and countless skeletons, Gideon is ready to abandon a life of servitude and an afterlife as a reanimated corpse. She packs up her sword, her shoes, and her dirty magazines, and prepares to launch her daring escape, but her childhood memories won't set her free without a service. There's a lot more in the back, but I'm not going to read like everything. Yeah, of course I'm going to talk about this. As it says, lesbian necromancers explore a haunted gothic palace in space. Totally everything I love. And yeah, these books are so exciting and so funny and so fun. They also have the horror elements. I mean, there's necromancy, there's skeletons, there's some monsters and other magic. There's a few horror scenes that are a bit creepy. And I mean, the cover just screams Halloween. I mean, it's even orange. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's a horror novel. It's a sci-fi fantasy, but it just has a lot of, there's skeletons in it. So it's very Halloween-y. And if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. I think they have a sale on right now. The ebook's like $1 or something. Maybe that was just last week, but if it's still on, I recommend you grab it. It's so much fun. It's definitely a book I want to reread, and I cannot wait for more of the series. The next one I'm going to talk about is Gills' Fright Diner. Look at this cover. It's so fun. So Duke and Earl are just passing through Rockwood County in their pickup truck when they stop at a diner for a quick bite to eat. They aren't planning to stick around until Loretta, the eatery's owner, offers them $100 to take care of her zombie problem. Given that Duke is a werewolf and Earl's a vampire, this looks right up their alley. But the shambling dead are just the tip of the particularly spicy iceberg. Someone seems out to drive Loretta from the diner, and more than willing to raise a little hell on earth if that's what it takes. Before Duke and Earl get to the bottom of the diner's troubles, they'll run into such otherworldly complications as undead cattle, an amorous ghost, a sorceress, and a terrifying occult power of Pig Latin. So, I forgot to say, the author is Ashlee Martinez. I can't really say much else about the book other than what's in the blurb, but it's definitely not scary, and it's very, very funny. Martinez has a bunch of these kind of comedy books based on mythology or based on, like, horror tropes. My favorites are Helen and Troy's Epic Road Quest, and this one, and The Automatic Detective. So if you like silly, absurd stories that kind of play loose with, like, the tropes of horror, I think you'll really like this. It's a lot of fun. It's a particular kind of horror that really appeals to me, but yeah, this one's great, and I highly recommend it. The next two are kind of old books. So this one, and again, there's no cover on this one. It's The Ghost and Mrs. Muir by R.A. Dick. This is actually a pseudonym for a woman writer who couldn't publish it under a male name because of the time period. When did it come out? I think it came out in like 1950 or something like that. Oh, 45, right. Okay, so what's this about? Burdened by debt after her husband's death, Lucy Muir insists on moving into the very cheap Gull cottage at the quaint seaside village of Whitecliff, despite multiple warnings that the house is haunted. Upon discovering the rumors to be true, the young widow ends up forming a special relationship with the ghost of handsome former sea captain Daniel Gregg. Through the struggles of supporting her children, seeking out romance from the wrong places, and working to publish the captain's story as a book, Blood and Swash, Lucy finds in her secret relationship with Captain Gregg a comforting and blossoming love she never could have predicted. It's a love story. It's a romance. It's very slow. I absolutely love this book. As they say, this woman and this ghost end up developing an attraction. And the story also takes some other twists and turns regarding Mrs. Muir's employment and status as a widow. It's also a very interesting take on the genre and the status of impoverished older women in the time period. I do take issue with some of the ways the captain treats Mrs. Muir. For example, her name's Lucy, and he's like, "No, I don't like that name. I'm going to call you Lucia." And I'm like, dude, you can't just rename her without permission. But I mean, compared to some of the other ways that women were treated in the 1940s, that was kind of minimal at best. And I mean, it was published in 1945, so you have to expect that kind of some eye-rollingly absurd things like that. But I mean, it was more just kind of amusing than truly annoying. The movie, there's like a black and white movie from I think like the 60s. It actually isn't bad either. But no, the book is really fun. I really like it. Yeah, it is slow. I mean, it is from the 40s, but if you like that kind of genre, I highly recommend this one, and it's really cool. And I mean, it's good for Halloween because there's a ghost in it, and as you know, I'm all about ghost love stories. I've got another old ghost love story for you, Tryst by Elspeth Thane. I love this novel. So as I said, it's another ghost love story. Look at that cover. It's about a young woman who falls in love with a ghost of a recently deceased soldier. That's all I really need to say. Aside from the ending, which actually made me cry. I never cry. But this one made me tear up. And I was like, oh. It's not scary in the least. It's very sweet. It's got an interesting mystery to it. I mean, look at the font is huge. You can read this book in like one sitting. When did it came out? It came out in 1939. So even older. This is 1974, I think. This version. But yeah, this one came out even like, World War II. So if you do like old books, I highly recommend Tryst and the Ghost and Mrs. Muir if you want some Halloween-y stuff that is not scary, but is a bit more on the women fall in love with ghosts trope, which we don't get enough of in society, do we? I have one more book to talk about, and that is Sharp Teeth. Look at this cover. By Toby Barlow. So it's this book. An ancient race of lycanthropes has survived to the present day, and its members are growing. Bent on dominance, rival factions are initiating the down and out LA into their ranks. The down and out of LA into their ranks. Caught in the middle are Anthony, a kind-hearted, lovesick dog catcher, and the object of his affection, a female werewolf who has abandoned her pack. This book is not for everyone, as it's a modern epic poem. You can see it's written in verse. It's about people who turn into dogs, it's not really werewolves, and how they seek to survive in the real world, and it's also about their pack dynamics. It's very visceral and very violent, so I don't recommend it if you can't handle a lot of dog fighting, but it's very fascinating. It's unlike anything I've ever read. I actually read this book... I remember where I was. I was in Florida when I read this book over 10 years ago with my friends, and I've only read it once, and I really keep meaning to read it again because it's really, really good. And I mean, again, this cover's cool. So yeah, that's my list of 8 8 Halloween-y reads that won't scare you, at least not a ton. So yeah, in the comments, let me know if you've read any of these, if you like them, if you have any other recommendations for me, if you have any other like 1950s like women falling in love with ghost stories, totally throw those my way too, because that's totally like one of my favorite genres. But I don't really like it to be, I don't like reading modern romance like that, but I really like the old ones. So I don't know, it's a very particular niche. Yeah, so, sorry it's like foggy in here. I don't know, it's just really bright in this room, and it looks like, oh, it suits the genre. It's foggy and scary in this room.